Have you ever had a conversation with someone and felt like they weren't listening? Like maybe they didn't even care about what you had to say? Not so long ago, life was a bit like that for women in Canada. They weren't allowed to vote. And if they spoke out and voiced their opinions, they could even be sent to jail. It was a time when women had more fear and less freedom, more rules and fewer rights. But 5 courageous Albertan women came together and changed it all. How, you might ask? Over a cup of tea. That's right, a cup of tea. But more on that in a minute. Almost 100 years ago, Emily Murphy, Irene Parlby, Nellie McClung, Louise McKinney, and Henrietta Muir Edwards were fed up with the way things were. Emily Murphy was the first female magistrate in Canada and wanted to be appointed to the Senate. But since she was a woman, she wasn't eligible. The law at the time said it was a position for persons, a word which somehow didn't include women. The women who would become known as the Famous Five set out to change that. But since women were strongly discouraged from getting together and talking about politics, the Famous Five set up what they called pink teas. The name was a great disguise. People assumed that they were just having dainty tea parties, but in reality, they were planning their strategy to move forward gender equality in Canada. All the planning and work that occurred during the pink teas led to the Famous Five's first petition to the Supreme Court of Canada. It was not to be that easy. Their petition was rejected. But they weren't giving up. They decided to approach the highest possible court authority at the time, the Privy Council of England. And on October 18th, 1929, an amazing thing happened. The Famous Five's petition led to the ruling that women were included as persons under law. These 5 courageous women changed the course of history in Canada and the Commonwealth and paved the way for women to be considered equal in all aspects of life. Generations later, their actions continue to inspire Canadian women to be ambitious, adventurous, and famous. Today, the Famous Five Foundation works to create a society where every voice is heard, valued, and has the power to challenge and conquer injustice.
Wow. Fantastic. Welcome, everybody. Bienvenue toutes. Welcome to a Famous Five Day when women have more power, we see more opportunities, and we seize more opportunities. Thank you all very much for making time to be with us today. Our land acknowledgement is going to be a little different because recently an amazing judge, chair, senator, magnificent man, Murray Sinclair, passed. And we want to pay tribute to him because his contributions have not only enhanced Canada, they will continue to enhance Canada and other nations around the world. We first met Murray Sinclair in our quests about 20 years ago, but Murray we met about 5 years ago when we asked that 2 little words in the national anthem be changed so that our anthem is a gender neutral anthem. And Senator Sinclair immediately responded and saying, yes, of course, this is the right thing to do. I'm glad you're doing it. How else can I help you? What a terrific supporter. What a terrific Canadian. And as we have said, his magnificent contributions with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the inquiry that he did before that and all the speeches he gave and the encouragement to people, both young and old, will live on forever. Murray is outstanding, and he helped us to recognize that we are all treaty people. Thank you very much, Murray Sinclair. Well, today's virtual pink tea will help all of us to be better leaders, to be bolder leaders, because of the women we are going to meet. Our first virtual pink tea VIP panelist is Randi Sue Gage. Randi is a Vietnam era veteran who has basically committed her life to promoting the importance and the help needed for veterans and for Indigenous Canadians. She is also one of our very loyal virtual pink tea supporters, and we always look forward to her comments in the chat room, and I hope you are adding your comments to the chat room as well. Randi also organized a fabulous pink tea on October 18th of this year, which was the 95th anniversary of the Persons Case, the declaration that enabled Canadian women to serve as senators, because it was the first legal declaration of the principle of equality. So our thanks to Randi, and you'll see a picture of her pink tea that she held to honor first responders, female first responders in Winnipeg at the Canadian Museum of Human Rights. Our second VIP guest is Major Melissa Marshall. David Peabody, the executive director of the military museums here in Calgary, recommended Melissa because he was very aware of her many contributions that she has made as a member of the Canadian Armed Forces. She's going to be able to tell us, time being what it is, just a few of the many ways that she and her sister and fellow officers have contributed to Canada. Bringing all of this together is Chief Petty Officer, Second Class, Joanne Legge. And she is normally in Ottawa, but currently she's in Edmonton. And perhaps she'll tell us a little bit more about her organization and about the pink tea that she organized for October the 18th. She's part of the Defense Women's Advisory Council in the National Capital Region. And when she had her pink tea, she combined the message of women's rights, the idea of our Constitution being a living tree, as also sanctioned by the Privy Council of Great Britain when they redefined the word persons as always meaning women and men. And she combined it with menopause, because menopause interrupts many women's leadership career. So it is now my great pleasure to say thank you to the three panelists of today and to Joanne. Where's Joanne? Joanne, are you on, ready to take over now?
Yes.
Yes, she is. So Joanne, over to you, and enjoy your conversation, as we will, with Melissa and with Randi.
Okay.
Go forth. Thank you.
Thank you, Frances. Hello, everyone. My name is Chief Petty Officer Joanne Legge, and my pronouns are she, her, and elle. I am wearing a naval uniform. My hair is up in a bun. I'm about 170 centimeters tall. I have a few wrinkles from smiling. And I'm sitting in my friend's kitchen, at my friend's kitchen table in his dining room. And I'm located at CFB Edmonton. It's snowing here in Edmonton. Today, I have the pleasure of being your VIP guest host for today's virtual pink tea. I would like to thank Frances Wright for this unique leadership opportunity at the start, so I don't forget to do it at the end. I'd like to let's start the conversation and session by introducing our VIP guests, Randi Soup and Major Melissa Marshall, and I have a few questions for them. Major Marshall and Randi Soup, I can get you both to turn on your cameras, please. And the first question is going to be for Major Marshall. I'll just wait. Major Marshall, are you there?
Yep, I'm ready whenever you are there.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Major Marshall. So today, the first question I have for you is, please tell us a little bit about your background. That is, life before you joined the Canadian Armed Forces.
Okay, so before I joined the Canadian Armed Forces, I was completing my university degree at St. Thomas University in Fredericton, New Brunswick. And the last year of my school, I'd really considered joining the Canadian Armed Forces. I was either going to join the Army, or I was going to facilitate more training in order to become a school teacher. My dad got sick my last year of university, and for me, that was kind of a pivotal time in my life. And it really affirmed to me that life is too short. So I made the quick decision to join the Army. And now here I am, 17 years later.
Wow, 17 years. That's a lot. Randi, you're up next. And Randi, please tell us a little bit about yourself. That is life before you joined the United States Army.
I did not have a life. I graduated out of high school. I grew up on we call them a horse farm because we're in the East, not in the West. Only ranches are in the West. So I had graduated high school. I was accepted into Atlantic Airlines School to become a stewardess. And I had a fight with my mom and took off and joined the Army. Well, actually, I went to join the Marines. The Marines said I didn't fit. Then I went to the Air Force. I didn't like the uniforms, and I went over to the Army recruiter, and he was giving the test. So I took the test. I missed one question that bothers me to this day that I missed it. Joined the Army, and there was 5 of us went in, and all 5 of us didn't get what we asked for. So yeah, I had no life before the Army.
Did I ask how old you were, or did you say that? I don't know if I mentioned. How old were you when you joined?
I was 17.
17? Okay. And ma'am, so if you hear me, for the people that are online, if you hear me, so it's Major Melissa Marshall, but I'll refer to her as ma'am. And she may refer to me as chief, so I just want individuals online to be aware of that. Okay. So, so ma'am, why did you join the Canadian Army?
So that's a great question. Thank you very much. So at the time, I was graduating university in April of 2007. As everyone remembers, Canada was contributing significantly to the war in Afghanistan. The only 3 trade options that were open to me at the time were the 3 from what we call the combat arms. So artillery officer, infantry officer, armored officer, and then, combat engineer officer as well. So I took about 90 seconds to read the description of what an artillery officer did, and then I signed a 9-year contract, and it was a bit off the cuff, we'll say, at that time, but I honestly, given my experience today, I wouldn't change a thing.
Fantastic, fantastic. And Randi, let's revisit why you joined the United States Army. And you said you were 17?
I was 17. I just graduated out of high school.
And what year was that?
Never mind.
Okay.
I'm over 21. Just leave it there. Chief,
Yeah.
you're gonna get in trouble, Chief. I'm telling you. Well, if you know when Vietnam happened, you know how old I am. I joined. I was the only girl at that. It's complicated. I have a very complicated family. And my mom kept telling me, if you're not going to go to the airlines, then you're going to go do something to make your dad proud. My dad was a highly decorated Korean War soldier. And I come from a huge military family that goes back. My grandmother had, I believe it was 6 of her boys went into World War II, and they all came home. Luckily, thank God. But it was just, it was the thing to do. There was a lot of other garbage going on at the time that I joined, and I didn't want to get involved in it. It's just when drugs were coming into being the big thing. And that's just not my thing. I was a farm girl, and Vietnam was going on. And I thought, okay, if I can't kick butt around here, I'll go join the Army and go kick butt over there. And so I went in and became an armor supply specialist. I've got my Spec 4 in that. So Major and I would have been, my mom and I would have been, I'd have been her one she's coming to. I would have been her radar is what I would have been.
Yeah, makes sense.
That's funny. I should probably tell the group that's online as well that, so my trade, I joined, I grew up in a small town in St. Emilie, Manitoba. I love the Manitoba connection here today. Really love it. And I joined a thing called Katimavik. It was a volunteer youth program. You made $1 a day. It was for 9 months. I got to, they had a military option, and I joined way back in 1985. So I've got about 38 years of service in the Canadian Armed Forces with the Royal Canadian Navy. I'm a Naval Combat Information Operator by trade, and I've spent some time at sea. And I've spent some time as a recruit instructor and as a recruiter. And I'll move on to the next question. So don't be afraid to ask me questions as we do this conversation, as we partake in this conversation. You're welcome to ask me questions as well. Okay, so the next question is, Randi, I believe you said this as well. What did you require as an educational requirement to join your occupation in the Army? Was there any?
Oh, you had to have a high school education. That was it. At that time, because the war was going on. I know it sounds terrible to say this day and age, because the Vietnam War was going on and people's life expectancy was 6 months once you stepped on ground. They were taking anybody that had a high school education. Women were not to go there, and any other than nurses, and anyone who joined and actually put foot down, you never left the United States. I was stationed at White Sands Missile Range, which is a Southern Command, according to my documents.
And what state is White Sands in? If you can let me know that, or let the people.
New Mexico.
New Mexico. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
I served from New Mexico to Panama.
Okay.
Mexico, Central America. Well, actually, on down into South America.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. If I can get you to come back online as well.
Yeah, for sure. So to be a combat arms officer, so specifically I'm an artillery officer, I just required a Bachelor of Arts education. And as a side note, I remember in grade 9 when I was first learning trigonometry, so A plus B equals C. And I remember sitting there and saying, like, why am I learning this? Because I'm never going to use this again in my life. And then the first day of my artillery training was a lesson called The Theory of Interior Opposite Angles, because artillery is all about opposite angles, trajectory, a bit of complicated math. And it clicked in my mind. I was like, here we are again. It has come back to haunt me. So
that's really interesting. I think I had the same experience doing relative velocity with the Navy for the radar. Okay. It's like trig in your head. Okay, great.
Oh,
yeah, so that's great. So I was going to ask you the next question I was going to ask, but I think we've already answered where we're currently in the world. Randi, you did mention you were currently in
Winnipeg.
And ma'am, you're currently
in Shilo, Manitoba.
Shilo, right? Shilo. So you're at CFB Shilo, and I'm at CFB Edmonton. So this is so it gives perspectives for the people that are out there online seeing this. Ma'am, I want to ask. I don't know who. Randi, I'm going to ask you this first because I've been asking the ma'am a lot of questions first. Randi,
Rank has its privileges.
yes, but we'll go with you. So Randi, have you ever deployed overseas?
Officially, no. But I spent about 7 years in Panama and did a lot of search and rescue work up through Central America and down into South America for the different earthquakes and things that are happening at that time down there. So that was best duty place I ever had. I would go back in a heartbeat. So, but I have gone to other places unofficially, shall we put it that way?
Okay.
So I've been in Sri Lanka. I went there during the tsunami. That was something that I did as a civilian, but pretty much wherever they needed search and rescue, they would grab us and take us, and we would go.
Oh, it must have been some interesting work that you were doing.
It was interesting, and it was heart-wrenching, and it made me a very angry person for a long time to see what the civilians, what the children were going through, and then see the politicians sitting in their cushy offices and drinking their expensive brandy while the kids couldn't have a glass of milk. Yeah. We won't go there today. Let's have fun.
Okay, sounds good. Ma'am, I'm going to push the question now to you, or pose the question now to you. Have you ever deployed overseas?
So I have. So I deployed to Kabul, Afghanistan in August in 2013 for 6 months, and that was part of the Canadian Contribution Training Mission Afghanistan, where we were training the Afghan forces. And then recently, I just got back from Iraq, a 6-month deployment that ended in September, and I was deployed with NATO Mission Iraq, who was facilitating a capacity building mission between NATO, the Iraqi Armed Forces, the Ministry of Defense, and the Ministry of Interior.
We'll have to get back to you what you did over there with a later question. I'm going to pose both Randy and you with some later questions. Thank you for that, ma'am. I'll let you know too, I've as a reservist, but I was workforce for a period of time. I have deployed as well on Her Majesty's Canadian ship Ottawa, and I deployed to the Persian Gulf in 1998 with, and we were the first Canadian warship tied in with an American battle group. So it was the first time, and I got to do some first serving alongside. It was the first female on USS Valley Forge and in a hot zone. So, and got to serve with the Royal and Manny Guard just in a small way, and working with them alongside as Jetty Sentry. And I have some interesting stories about that, but I probably won't share today. Thank you. Okay, so that's great. So you've talked about where you've served overseas. Now, can you let us know what countries, so some of the countries' militaries you've worked at? I know you've mentioned two. Have you worked with, both Randy, have you worked with other countries' militaries? And Randy, let's start. I know I'm starting with you again, so let's start with you. And what roles did you perform with those other countries?
Officially, no, but a lot of times when we go in to do, you know, the rescue, the work, the medical work, I know when I was in Sri Lanka, I had 6 men around me all the time, which they were my guards, because what I was doing, I was the pharmacy. And so I had to be guarded at all times so that nobody would come in. And even though they tried with the guards, I worked, the work I did in Panama, actually met Mr. Noriega while I was down there. Oh yeah, he was quite very flirty man. Let me tell you, very Spanish man, very, very flirty. But we would work with whatever military group there was, that the country that needed the assistance. So I was pretty much always the logistics, but because of my medical background, I would get pulled into the medical parts of it as well.
Okay, thank you, Randy. Thank you, ma'am. Would you like me to? Are you able to answer that, or would you like me to? I know you'll be able to answer it, but would you like me to repeat the question?
No, that's okay, but thank you. So during my deployment to Afghanistan, so I was with a Canadian element, so specifically just all Canadians, but would work from I'd say an ancillary capacity on the camp, because we were on the NATO camp. And then with my recent deployment to Iraq this year, I was actually part of NATO. So NATO actually has what we call 30 different troop contributing nations that are also part of NATO Mission Iraq capacity building support to Iraq. So like all the countries you would think of you'd never work with, but so I had a Latvian roommate, so Latvian, American, the Dutch, the Spanish, the Polish, Greek, and then insert about 20 other different nations here. So it's very interesting working in a multinational environment. Things that maybe you take for granted in terms of like basic conduct of language during the day often becomes challenging, because each country is supposed to deploy personnel that has what's called proficiency level 2 in both speaking and writing for English. And that was not always the case, which sometimes has the capacity to lead to a breakdown in communications in the workplace. So, and then plus working with the Iraqi Armed Forces as well. So it was a very interesting tour from the myriad of dynamics that come from other countries involved.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to stop here right now. And I would now we're going to listen to Janine Magtish. I'm probably butchered her name. I'm sorry if I have Janine. So Janine is going to ask the guest panelist a few questions. These questions have been pre-recorded. And before this happens, I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. Janine holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in history from Sir Wilfrid Laurier University, where she graduated in 2014. Janine currently works in Houston with Petroleum Club of Houston. She has a personal connection to the Canadian Armed Forces, which is very meaningful. Her sister serves as a surgical nurse and is currently stationed at CFB Edmonton Base Hospital. Janine firmly believes in the importance of Canada's military involvement on the global stage and is fostering a strong international partnership. And I have to say, since I'm at CFB Edmonton, I'm going to see if I can find Janine's sister, but I need to find out what her last name is first. So hopefully I find that out. Okay, so if I can get the video to play, please, that will be great.
Hi, my name is Janine Matish, and I've been interested in Canadian military history since high school, so much so that I decided to go to Wilfrid Laurier University for a Bachelor of Arts degree with a major in history. Plus, my sister is a member of the Canadian Armed Forces today. I have a couple questions for you. Within the Canadian military, what is something you would personally like to see improvement on? What is something you think the Canadian military does really well that sets itself apart globally from others? And what's upcoming that makes you excited about the future? Thank you for your time.
Ma'am, you're on camera, so let's go with you.
Okay, so I believe her first question was, what is something that, something to words the effect of, what is the Canadian Forces currently working on and working towards improving? I believe that was the first one.
Yeah, that was part of it. Yes, you've got it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been part of, I guess I'd say, higher level discussions in terms of this initiative. So for anyone that doesn't necessarily, read mainstream media, so more often than not, the Canadian Armed Forces are called upon to deploy in support of domestic operations. So that's anything from floods, fires. I was personally involved in the inoculation to 23 Northern Indigenous communities. And what I would like to see, and hopefully comes to fruition in the future, is recognition in terms of on the military side from our deployment in support of domestic operations. So anytime we deploy expeditiously, that is outside of Canada, we receive a medal that we're able to wear on our uniform when we're in a parade state dress. For domestic operations, we don't receive medals. And me personally, and I've spoken to a lot of personnel, I think it would go a really long way in terms of morale, increasing sense of pride within soldiers in the CAF if we're able to also receive medals from a domestic ops perspective. So I'm hoping that they're still working towards that, because I think that would be a great initiative overall.
Okay, thank you. And one of her last parts, that's an excellent idea. I like your train of thought, ma'am, with regards to that. It's great to hear. One of her last question is, what's upcoming that makes you excited about the future?
I think it's just that Canada's continued involvement in world affairs. So recently, as of 2022, the Prime Minister committed what's called a brigade level group to our deployment Opry Assurance, which is stationed in Latvia. So that's about 2,300 Canadian soldiers that are will be deployed to Latvia. And that's part of the NATO mission for deterrence against Russia. So I think that's a really inspiring endeavor, seeing all these multinational countries come together in order to deter aggression on an international front.
Is there anything else you would like to add to that? Do you know anybody going?
That's a great question, and I know we've talked about this. So I'm currently married to a sergeant as part of the 2nd Battalion, Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, and my husband will be deploying to Latvia effective 14 December. So it's obviously something that I'm very proud of. He has multiple deployments, and you know, you always try to prepare for deployments, but each deployment is different. So I'm super proud of what he's going to be doing in support of Canada on an international capacity.
So we have an interesting connection, and I don't think Randi knows this, but so the reason I'm in Edmonton, and I think I spoke to you about this. So my boyfriend is actually deploying along with your husband. He's leaving on the 27th of November to Latvia, and he's going over there as 2IC as tech services. So I work for the Chief of Professional Conduct and Culture, and they're allowing me to work remotely in Edmonton, which is a bonus to help him out before he deploys. So I'm super proud of him as well. Thank you. So Randi, you're up. Thanks, ma'am.
Boy, you two just do not make a lady's life very much. I'm telling you, now I got two guys to worry about that I know women attached to. This is not fair. And my
Randi,
significant...
Sorry, you're impressive. So don't even, like, you've got an impressive background.
My significant other is in Brazil. So, okay, you know, I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, the first question was...
what is something you would like personally like to see improved upon? You're working on something now. You can relate it.
God. The Indigenous community, the Black community, veterans have been hucked on over the years. And I don't know if you know this or not, but I'm the founder of Aboriginal Veterans Day, November 8th. I gave birth to that, and I actually have the stretch marks, the bite marks, and the scars from all of the racism, the misogynistic attitude that of a lot of people, and the downright hateful stuff that have gone through and am still going through regarding that. I would like to see overall, generally, everywhere, veterans being treated better. I am fed up with seeing our veterans living on the street in a cardboard box because they cannot afford to have a roof over their head. I'm sick and tired of seeing our veterans being refused medical care. Don't stir the pot too much. Let's just say that I want to see better care for anybody and everybody who put on a uniform and wrote that blank check and said, okay, you can either let me walk an easy path or you can blow my head off in defense of this North American world, and I'll be okay with it. So I'm not sure that's what you were expecting, but and I want to say one thing. I'm very proud of both of you women for standing by your man and being so strong to be able to do your job and know that they're in the face of danger. My deceased husband was also in the military when I was in. We were together for I don't know how many years. And I know the deployment when I was home with two kids and he was wherever, trying to keep a smile on your face for the kids and for yourself. It's not easy. I really respect both of you for that. And I'm out here if you ever need to complain about it.
Don't worry, I have your phone number down.
Oh God, she's got my phone number. Oh, and the other one was, the second one. I definitely want to answer your second question.
Go ahead.
The Canadian forces, in my personal view, are probably the best peacekeepers in the world. They are, no one, nowhere comes close to what they do to stand in the face of danger, to have bullets flying at them, to have other excrements flying at them, and still put on that blue helmet and go out there and want to, I guess they're blue, white, I'm not even sure what color they are, but try to save other people. That is just, Canada does it the best. I don't care whether it's on the sea, in the air, or on the ground. Canada does it. They're the gold standard for me.
That's great to hear. That's great to hear. Thank you. And then last question she had is, what's upcoming that makes you excited about the future?
That I'm going to Ottawa and get to terrorize a whole bunch of people on Monday. I'm Sorry. I'm going over to make a presentation to the House of Commons Veterans Committee on Indigenous and Black veterans. And my topic, they sent us a list of what to do, and they're going to learn about tampons and menopause. So yeah, I'm quite excited about that. I'm looking forward to being part of trying to fix some of the things that are missing. Again, it's a veterans thing. It's an active duty thing. But I find too many people don't want to speak up about it. Men have issues, and believe it or not, world out there listening, yes, men do go through a form of menopause. It's called andropause, and they get as nutty as women. But it's something that needs to be addressed because women are aging in the forces, and they're not getting the help and support that they need. So, yep, I'm going over there on Monday to talk about it. And I can't believe that somebody was crazy enough over there to say, "Don't go get this woman and have her come talk to us." Okie dokie.
I just want to check and see how much time I have left. I think we have, thanks, Randi. And I'm glad to hear you're going to be talking about menopause, because I know for people, so I'm working on something for menopause as well with the Canadian Armed Forces. And I actually did with, because Frances mentioned it in the beginning, I hosted a pink tea with regards to the person's case and World Menopause Day. And I was probably the first person in the military to write a statement of work to bring a guest speaker in to talk about menopause into the Canadian Forces. And it was well received, and it was time. It's time now. Plus there was 2 other medical doctors that came in. I'm currently on my senior leadership program doing my DL course, and my papers, I've had to write 2 papers, and I chose to write about menopause. And basically getting places or policies, working on helping to work out some policies, because we have a lot more women who are in that age bracket or in their 30s that are going through menopause, but we need to put some policies or health procedures in place to support those women as well.
I'm here if you need me.
Great. Thanks, Randi. Thanks. Okay, let's move on. And I think we've covered all of Janine's questions. We have about 10 minutes left for our discussion. And the next question I'm going to ask, we'll go back to the one of the questions. Randi, you're on camera. What kind of career challenges have you faced in your career in the United States Army? And how did you overcome them? How did you twist the narrative with regards to that?
Well, I am a negative Taurus, so that says it. Seriously, thinking back, I was pretty well accepted because I have never been shy. Well, I shouldn't say that. I was shy at one time, but when I went into the military, that shyness seemed to go away, and I knew my stuff. I knew what I had to do, and I really didn't have that much trouble, other than from female officers. I didn't have that much trouble with the enlisted and with the ones that I was actually working with. But I think it was just the fact that I'm a very stubborn person, and when I know something, when I've been given an order, when I've been given instructions, I try to do it, not necessarily by the book, but I try to do it to get it done. But it was a very interesting being in. I was the only woman. Come on, this is back in the days when there were 650 men in the unit that I was in, and I was the only woman. Yeah. So I pretty much got my way most of the time, but yeah, but it was been interesting, but I wouldn't change anything.
Thank you. Thanks, Randi. And ma'am, Major Marshall?
So I'd say joining the combat arms, so the combat arms trades, as I previously mentioned, like 100%, it's a very male-dominated trade, and you're either going to be one or you're like one of three females within the unit. So when I was going through training 17 years ago, it was quite a bit different. We used to apply a bit of a mantra, like you train people till you break them. We don't do that anymore because there's no value in training people to the point at which they got hurt. So throughout the first couple of years, I'd say I was fighting an uphill battle. You know, if the minimum standard was this and I met the standard, it was still not going to be good enough. You know, I used to have like, do you want me to carry the radio for you? Like, is that too heavy? We were about to deploy in 2012 to Wainwright for 3 months for this very large scale exercise. So basically living in the field for 3 months. I broke my back by fracturing my spine. And I heard rumors throughout the unit that I broke my back on purpose so I wouldn't have to go to Wainwright for 3 months. I don't know anyone, unless you're a professional actor, who can actually time it perfectly when a horse is going to drag and step you. But needless to say, it was not done on purpose. And then kind of after that, around the 2014 timeframe, it was when the CAF started to introduced real Operation Honor, which was a policy largely gained towards the erosion of harassment within the Canadian Armed Forces. And then shortly after that, we started to see a change in the Canadian Armed Forces from a culture perspective. So I'd say the mentality shifted quite a bit after that, and I've seen it as being a part of the combat arms trade. But it was almost like the first 5 years of my career, like I had to be better than just the normal standard, which was acceptable for the male population. But it wasn't good enough being a female. So I always had to like carry more weight, run faster, be able to do more push-ups or chin-ups just to be able to like prove myself from a basic level perspective. And then like, you know, I just wanted to challenge myself internally. After I broke my back, I was like, okay, I can't ride horses anymore. So now I'm going to get into like the bodybuilding world of things. And anytime I honestly say like I'm, you know, paired in some sort of competition, whether it's our yearly physical fitness evaluation or we're doing a competitive shoot, and if it's just me against 20 other guys on the line, I'm like, my mentality is always like, okay, like no one's going to beat me, and I'm going to like go as hard as I can just to, you know, because we have a lot of females starting to come up, and whether that's from like a support trades perspective outside of the combat arms world. So you see it more than often. I'm like, even if someone's not, you don't actually see someone looking, someone is always looking. And as a female, you're still being judged upon, even if though you've already proven yourself. So I always try to adopt the mentality, like if I can be a professional role model for, especially not just for like young females coming up or for young male soldiers as well, then I always try to do that in everything that I apply myself. So whether it's through physical fitness, whether it's in my parades like dress, just anywhere I can be a positive role model, I really try to instill that, because I knew what I went through growing up in the military, and I don't ever want to see that come back again, because there's no value in what I was exposed to or the training that I was exposed to from a let's break them to make them better type perspective.
Okay.
Yeah, so agreed. So agreed.
Yes. Thanks. Thanks. I have to say, I felt like a guinea pig kind of throughout my whole career as being the only woman in the room in the majority of the items, and always having to prove yourself and having to work twice as hard as your male counterparts all the time. So I'm just going to move on from there. And we've got 4 minutes. So let's see, I'll throw a question out there for Randi. You're on camera, so let's go with you. Name 2 of your proudest moments in uniform.
Oh, wow. I think the first one was when I got whack of the quarter. And that is, well, I was the Women's Army Corps. It was back when, you know, we actually had Women's Army Corps. And I got the highest, I behaved myself, okay? That's the basic thing. But I got whack of the quarter, and I got this beautiful military ring with diamonds and the whole 9 yards on it, which ended up getting stolen, but that's another story. That's probably the proudest of it. Golly, there's so many little things that happened. I really think being able to communicate with people no matter where I was at. And I can't explain it. I don't know why. I can't speak German. I can't speak other languages. Let's just put it that way. But no matter where I was, if I was in Panama, or if I was in Portugal, or, wherever, when I was in Sri Lanka, I don't speak a word of their language, yet I could communicate with the people and understand what they were saying or needing or whatever. And to me, I think that was one of the proudest things for me to be able to do, is to be able to take someone in distress and hurting and, lost and seeing their home gone or their child bleeding all over the place, and calm them down. I think that to me is probably one of the best things I ever did when I was in the military.
It sounds very like I'm impressed. It's very profound. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Ma'am, how about yourself? What is your proudest moment in uniform? Or what are
Well, that's certainly hard to follow Randy after that. So I'll try. But not too long ago, we were going through the COVID pandemic, and the Canadian Armed Forces was called upon in order to help facilitate the inoculation to 23 northern Indigenous communities. And if you had have asked me 20 years ago, do you think you'd ever be involved in anything of that nature? And I would say, no, not whatsoever. So I was actually involved in it. My unit was the one that deployed into the 23 remote communities in northern Manitoba. So I was what we call a battery commander. So I coordinated all the combat support, support to this deployment, to the sustainment of this deployment, and to the teardown of this deployment. So that was deploying all of our personnel into every different community. That was sustaining them from a feeding perspective, a laundry perspective, a lodging perspective, getting personnel in and out of that area when they needed to occur, coordinating aircraft via WhatsApp when I was at the gym, in terms of picking up equipment, dropping off personnel. I never thought I'd be doing that in between lifting weights, but here I was on WhatsApp coordinating it. And I think like at the end of the mission, it was about 3.5 months long stationed out of Thompson, Manitoba. And I apologize if I get the terminology wrong, but the Grand Chief, we made this CAF video, and there was the Grand Chief speaking in their Indigenous language, identifying like, we are so grateful for the CAF support to our communities and our people. And I'll never forget that, because like, I don't think there's any greater role for the CAF, other than the CAF's ability to support Canadians in their time of need. And I'll be forever grateful for being able to be actively and part of that experience.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to say one of my proudest moments in uniform. I'm going to stop because we're at, there we go. One of my proudest moments was this May, and seeing our new Chief of Defence Staff being appointed, General Jenny Carignan, our first woman Chief of Defence Staff. So she's the most senior member of the Canadian Armed Forces, and it was fantastic to see her being promoted this past, I believe it was this past May, if I can remember. And sorry, my clock is going off, and there's the sonar telling me it's time to end our chat. But there is a question on the chat from the webinar, and it's for Randi. So I want to go back to Randi. And it says, Randi, what do you suppose it's other women who are hard on women in a male-dominant trade? It's a question from the audience. Why do you suppose it's other women who are hard on women in a male-dominant environment?
I don't know. That has always been something that has bothered me. Let's face it, ladies, we are our own worst enemies. We cannot see another woman being better than what we are. We don't want to, instead of supporting a woman, we prefer to tear it down. And we have to change that mentality. That's not my way of thinking. That's just, I'm giving you that as a general statement, because I've faced it myself many, many times when I'm doing something to improve something. Other women are trying to tear me down, calling me all kinds of things, lying. We have to stop that, because the only way ladies, we are 47% of the population of this world. I think it may have gone up, but the last time I seen it was 47.9%, some weird number. Stop and think about it. We birth 100% of this country, this nation, this world. So shouldn't we be strong enough to help each other, to make each other, no matter where we are in this growth, up, help everybody rise up and run the world the way that the world should be run, with love, care, respect. Come on, ladies, let's work together.
I like what you said, Randi, and I see you have a poppy on your shoulder, a beaded
I
poppy.
do.
And so a lot of us have now, military women, I know at different rank levels, are telling each other to embrace the tall poppy in the room. Stop cutting the poppy down. Stop cutting that tall poppy and support each other. So thanks for saying that. Okay.
You're welcome.
So one last question, and then I'm going to wrap it up. What would you tell if a woman was interested in joining the military today? What would you tell her, Randi?
I would tell her, do it, but before you signed on the dotted line, you get the letter and the guarantee of what field you want to go into, what you want to be. Because, like, for myself, I was going into nursing. I was my medical background. That's where I was going. 5 of us went in together. They shifted our names one over, and I ended up in armor supply. So get a guarantee and get in there and do it. It's a fabulous life.
Okay, perfect. Ma'am, I'm not going to ask you that question. I'm going to ask you a totally different question.
Oh gosh.
Okay. So it is. So I'd like you to stop here for a moment, and now I would like you to think about the famous 5 women having tea.
Oh.
And Randi might want to answer this one as well, but so think of Emily, think of Louise, think of Nellie, think of Henrietta, and think of Irene. Thinking about them sipping tea and discussing what they needed to do so women could be recognized as persons. I will now ask you the following question: what are the significances of the famous 5 women to you as a woman and as a veteran?
Whew. It's a big question. So I would say, in the world, especially in first world countries, whoever thought women would have to campaign, advertise, identify to justify their rationale as persons, or to be of equal playing field, and especially in a first world country, like, I'll never understand why that was always, why did they have to fight for it, and why there was so much initial pushback, and why did that pushback occur? We should only ever be supportive of our brothers and sisters to the left and right of that. And, if that's how Canada was originally adopted, where they were just automatic equal citizens on equal playing field, I think we would have seen the induction of women into the Navy a lot earlier. There wouldn't have ever been closed trades to females in the military. And just whoever thought that they would have to fight just to basically justify their existence as a human that is supposed to be equitable to males.
Thank you. Randi, you've got a couple of seconds, and then I'm going to have to, I'm over by 1 moment.
I'm just going to say, ma'am, Chief, when you're both in the province, we'll talk about this, because I will not touch this one. It will just send me right down a rabbit hole. So,
Okay.
It's been fun.
Sounds great.
Thank you. Thank you. We can talk a little, can ask you about your heroes, but we'll go on. And it was a pleasure meeting you. It was fabulous. It's been a great experience. Thanks for joining to Francis and the Famous 5 Foundation. Thanks for having, if I can thank us for all 3 of us. Thanks for having us. Thanks for hosting us. Thank you.
Yes, I'm sorry to end the very profound, I think it's just one of the most profound conversations we had as part of the virtual Pink Teas. but it's something that's really important to understand both a national and an international role for military and how women are part of it. In terms of the famous five, they of course lived during the First World War, and Nellie's two sons, two of her three sons, went to war and came back, as we used to say, different. One of them then descended into alcoholism and eventually suicide. We know now, of course, that they had PTSD and that there was no help for them. Luckily, there is some help available, more and more, and we know more about preparing people to go into combat too, and how best to assess that while they're experiencing it, and then afterwards. But when Louise McKinney, one of the famous five, was elected, because Alberta, although the third province to grant women the right to vote provincially, was the first province to hold a provincial election. And Louise wins in Claresholm. But at the same time, the Alberta government gave all the people, all the military, the right to elect one member of the Alberta legislature to represent them. And two members of the legislature to represent them. So of course, people campaigned, particularly those overseas, and it wasn't primarily for those overseas, that the men would be the two leaders. But luckily, Roberta McAdams met a journalist who said to her, a female journalist who was in the communications division, said to her, why don't you, as a military nurse, campaign on the slogan, give your first vote to the man of your choice, but give your second vote to the sister. So she was known as a nursing sister. She was actually a dietitian, and she ran the military hospital, the kitchen in London, England. And as it turned out, the troops did elect a man, and I'm sorry, I don't know his name, but they also elected Roberta McAdams. And while Louise was living in Alberta, she becomes the first woman to be elected by both men and women in the British Empire, and Roberta McAdams becomes the second. She stayed in England to finish up her term, as good military people do, and then came back to Alberta and helped repatriate veterans, particularly as it applied to education. So there's a very strong tie with the famous five and with the women of that time at the turning of the 19th century to 20th century, 1920s, to be involved with the military. And today was such an excellent example that of the approximately 100,000 members of the military in Canada in various shapes and forms, and the percentage of women is 19%. It's 19% of the very best women of Canada that have joined the military. We saw this today in terms of the breadth of service, the dedication of service, and the willingness to help each other. And I would just say, I think it's a myth that women don't help other women. It certainly are some that don't, but more and more women do help other women. And that's one of the things we as the Famous Five, and now through all of you, are showing today. But now it's time to have a toast. So I'm hoping you might have a teacup
I have two.
or a glass or a canteen to say thank you to the three remarkable, well, four through Janine's video taped. Say thank you very much. So I would like to say, first of all, thank you to Chief Petty Officer Second Class Joanne Legge. What a remarkable person you are, Joanne. I had no idea of all the firsts that you have overcome and achieved in your career within the military. But it was such a pleasure when somebody said, I think you should meet Joanne and have her participate in this virtual pink tea. And then, of course, for you to have a pink tea. So let's raise our toast of thanks to Joanne for her many firsts and for leading us today. Thank you, Joanne. And of course, there are two panelists that Joanne brought the best out of, and we could have learned more about Joanne, but she was busy bringing out the best in the two panelists. And so toast of thanks to Randi Sue for the work for two nations that she has pursued in her lifetime, and for the way that she is advocating for the ability or the opportunity for more women to participate in military. You were probably part of the group, Randi, that persuaded CAF, as the major says, the Canadian Armed Forces, to provide nursing T-shirts for the women that are part of the military. So there are some changes being made, and I'm sure you will succeed next week in Ottawa even more so. So here's to Randi Sue and all her many contributions and of today. Thank you. And lastly, the future of Calgary, Canada's military is very evident in our major, isn't it? Melissa, thank you very much for all that you have done. Your stories were fascinating, as was Randi's, and as were Randi's and Joanne's. But you're our future, and we hope that this is one way of supporting you, and there will be other ways. And know that you are supported by your country, and keep learning, keep moving up in the chain, and being a superb role model for women's leadership. And so our thank you to Melissa, to the major.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we were lucky to have Janine pose a series of questions to our female leaders today. And so we thank her very much, sitting in Houston, Texas. So even from there, we say thank you, Janine, for thinking about the military and supporting your sister, who's part of the services. Thank you. So now I'm going to ask our three special guests to turn off their audio and their video so they can relax for a moment, because they have been so intense to give us the very best of the highlights of their life. So if you would turn off your video and your audio and just listen now, please, to the Famous Five News. And the first thing I'd like to talk about is to pray gratitude for the 95th anniversary that happened on October the 18th of this year, 95 years after the principle of equality was first proclaimed. And there were a number of events that happened across Canada, but here in Calgary at the headquarters for the Famous Five Foundation, we organized a series of events. And the first was a public celebration at the Women Are Persons Monument in Olympic Plaza. Next slide, please. And we were thrilled to have the federal minister, who is on the right-hand side of the screen, the Honorable Marcy Ian, Federal Minister of the Status of Women, participate, as well as the provincial minister from the province of Alberta. She's in the middle, just holding the proclamation, because she had the province of Alberta declare October 18th as Persons Day. This also happened in Manitoba and Nova Scotia, and we're hoping it will happen in all the provinces as we go forward. But here we have the picture of some of the leaders we had. There were singers, there were Indigenous land acknowledgements, there were young people involved in our Persons Day celebration. 200 people, chilly weather, all came down and said, we're glad to be persons. Next, please. Then we went to the Fairmont Palliser in the Crystal Ballroom, because it is one of only 5 places where the Famous Five were all together. On the left is a picture of Tara Weber. It's unfortunate that we're not seeing the other side of her jacket, because she was one of a small group of Canadians who just received the King Charles Coronation Medal for her service, particularly as it pertains to the media. And then sitting on my right is the former Lieutenant Governor of Alberta, Lois Mitchell, who's been a tremendous supporter of the Famous Five Foundation and of women and of the history of Canada. To the right is again the Honorable Tanya Furr, the Alberta Minister of Arts, Culture, and Status of Women, who was a major supporter and funder of the 95th anniversary. Next, please. So there were pink teas all across Canada, for which we are so thrilled. And the first one in the upper left, I think, is a picture of Joanne's pink tea in Ottawa for the women, the defense women who are part of an advisory council for the Canadian Armed Forces. Fantastic. In the middle, I believe, is Chestermere, Alberta. The third one on the top is from Summerside PEI. In 1993, the top 5 political offices were all filled by women, largely thanks to the Premier, Catherine Colbeck, who is sitting in the front row, second from the left, between the lady with the pink jacket and the lady in gray black, who was a senator from Nova Scotia, but who also served as the deputy speaker in the PEI legislature. So they established a group called as the PEI Famous Five. And then coming down to the bottom, we have some more presentations of the Person's Day celebration, as well as the larger photo, which I believe is Randi Sue's tribute to female first responders. And it's not too late to have a pink tea. We're only 6 weeks away from the end of 2024. So it's still possible for you to gather 4 buddies or more and talk about and show gratitude to the women who have built Canada and are continuing to build Canada, and focusing on what can we do to make this even a better country. Next, please. One of the ways we marked the 95th anniversary, and this was largely due to my colleague, Kimberly Gunn, is we contacted various iconic architecture and asked, will you light up your bridge, your tower for us? So you see on the far left is the Calgary Tower, and beside it are the Girl Guides who came down to participate in Person's Day, and we're very grateful to the Girl Guides and their famous 5 crests. And the CN Tower in Toronto also lit up in purple and pink. And as well, there were bridges in various places of Canada that also marked the fact that women and men are equal and both are needed to build this country, Canada. Next. So in Ottawa, our group in Ottawa, the Famous Five Foundation in Ottawa, also held their pink tea, and they honored 5 trailblazers from the Outaouais region, and pretty extraordinary women. Their names are all there on the right-hand side for you to read and remember. And there's more information about what happened during the 95th anniversary coming soon on our website. But again, it's not too late to celebrate. So please think about getting together some friends and remembering what a remarkable country and being grateful for the country that we're in, but also to do your pledge to build just a little bit more, a little more inclusive, a little more compassionate, a little more diverse, and certainly a little more equitable Canada. Next, please. So October 18th is Person's Day. Every October 18th is Person's Day. So what we want to do, and we're carrying on this program of asking all the provinces and all the municipalities to declare October 18th as Person's Day as a way of expressing gratitude to the women who have enhanced the rights and privileges of Canadians, particularly Canadian women, but also the way of encouraging each of us to pursue a line of service. So if you're in a community that hasn't declared October 18th Person's Day yet, please start thinking about approaching them and helping us make this happen, because it's coming around next year. So we want to start looking at what we're doing as we build to the 100th anniversary of the Person's Case in 2029. So your suggestions are most welcome. Next, please. We recently received on October 18th the news that Women and Gender Equality, that's what WAGE stands for, and Youth Canada has given us a grant to revitalize, to reorganize the Famous Five Foundation. So we are going to be establishing a new national not-for-profit organization. We're going to do a 5-year strategic plan, a 5-year fundraising plan, and a 5-year communications plan. So again, your suggestions, your help is much appreciated. If you'd like to be involved with the discussions, let us know. Just admin@famous5, the number 5.ca, and we'll be very pleased to have you involved. Next, please. So thank you all who were particularly involved with the 95th as a way of saying goodbye to the Women Are Persons Monument in Olympic Plaza in Calgary. The plaza is being redeveloped. The Arts Commons organization is going to be building a new building in the area, which precluded, well, of course, the famous five can't stay through construction. But on October 18th, we basically said, thank you for 25 years. We're thrilled that there was a chair there for anybody to sit in and join the discussion. They now are in storage in a heated Department of Parks in Calgary, City of Calgary, where they will spend the winter. And then next spring, we'll be announcing in conjunction with the City of Calgary, who owns the monument, where the famous five will spend the next portion of their life. And hopefully we'll have a big celebration at that time too. Next, please. The maquette tour is continuing, and the maquette tour will be in, the maquette will be in Trent University. Thank you to the First People's House of Learning and Don Lavelle Harvard's leadership, in conjunction with the Battle Library's Chief Librarian, Emily Tufts. So Trent University. And then next, please. And after that, they will likely come back to Alberta and tour through a number of centers in conjunction with city halls, with senior high schools, with libraries, so that more of us know about it. And then we have to figure out, what do we do for 2026, 2027, 2028? So this is where we need your suggestions and your financial help with telling the story of what some of the women have done, some outstanding women, some of the Democratic champions of Canada. Next, please. So the Pink Tea series, it will be continued hopefully for next year. I say hopefully because we need funding for this project. And we also need some ideas about what to do for the 5 sessions in 2025. So please send us your ideas of who might be a funder of the series, or if you'd like to contribute to it. And secondly, who might be some of the speakers that you're wanting to hear from and grow from. Next, please. And so it's time for me to invite Randi Sue, Major Melissa Marshall, and Chief Petty Officer, Second Class, Joanne Legge, to rejoin us as we take a pledge, as we do our acknowledgement that we are leaders too. So if you would kindly raise your cup, your glass, and say after me. Oh, I should say, first of all, put your shoulders back, take a deep breath in and out, and in a strong, clear voice, affirm that you're a leader too. So I'm going to count down from 5, and then we will say, to me, I'm a leader too. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. To me, I'm a leader too. And then seal the acknowledgement with your sip of tea or water, and with the pride and confidence that we are all leaders. And we've met 3 extraordinary leaders today that will help each and every one of us as we go forth. So, merci, miigwech. Thank you for joining us today. Remember, there's still 6 weeks to the end of 2024 for you to do something to enhance the possibilities and opportunities for women. And we'll see you in 2025. Thank you. Good night. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have you ever had a conversation with someone and felt like they weren't listening? Like maybe they didn't even care about what you had to say? Not so long ago, life was a bit like that for women in Canada. They weren't allowed to vote. And if they spoke out and voiced their opinions, they could even be sent to jail. It was a time when women had more fear and less freedom, more rules and fewer rights. But 5 courageous Albertan women came together and changed it all. How, you might ask? Over a cup of tea. That's right, a cup of tea. But more on that in a minute. Almost 100 years ago, Emily Murphy, Irene Parlby, Nellie McClung, Louise McKinney, and Henrietta Muir Edwards were fed up with the way things were. Emily Murphy was the first female magistrate in Canada and wanted to be appointed to the Senate. But since she was a woman, she wasn't eligible. The law at the time said it was a position for persons, a word which somehow didn't include women. The women who would become known as the Famous Five set out to change that. But since women were strongly discouraged from getting together and talking about politics, the Famous Five set up what they called pink teas. The name was a great disguise. People assumed that they were just having dainty tea parties, but in reality, they were planning their strategy to move forward gender equality in Canada. All the planning and work that occurred during the pink teas led to the Famous Five's first petition to the Supreme Court of Canada. It was not to be that easy. Their petition was rejected. But they weren't giving up. They decided to approach the highest possible court authority at the time, the Privy Council of England. And on October 18th, 1929, an amazing thing happened. The Famous Five's petition led to the ruling that women were included as persons under law. These 5 courageous women changed the course of history in Canada and the Commonwealth and paved the way for women to be considered equal in all aspects of life. Generations later, their actions continue to inspire Canadian women to be ambitious, adventurous, and famous. Today, the Famous Five Foundation works to create a society where every voice is heard, valued, and has the power to challenge and conquer injustice.